Right folks, well this is, I'm very grateful for such a generous turnout, although you have to take my word for it, for the way we do this. A room full of people, that's what we want to see. Now, last year you probably recall that there was a film called the Detroit, well I think it was just called Detroit Riots, tore the heart out of Detroit City. 50 years ago I was there. I often think about Laurent. He was the African-American boy that I fell in love with. I wonder about him. I wonder if he's still alive. Anyway, the trailer is on my website. Well, all you've got to do is Google Detroit, and that's how you can see it if you want to see it. In an attempt to maintain the authenticity, the flavour and the accuracy of the 1960s. When quoting, sometimes I'll refer to African Americans as Negroes. It was a perfectly respectable word to use in those days, but I shall be quoting in the context of the time. I know it's not acceptable now. From 1963 to 1976 I lived in Detroit, and each year I came back to England, for as long as funds would last actually. I had several jobs in Detroit, but the one I was most content with was the job which was stress-free and easy, bank messenger. Nice job, very easy. All you did is do what you're doing now, sat down, until the boss, Herb, would say, Narvel, this goes to the Buell building, 14th floor or whatever. I loved it. The pay was poor, but the duties were undemanding. One duty I had, which happened at 8:30 every morning, the first duty, is I had to stand on the sidewalk outside of the front of the impressive Palladian frontage of the bank, with its Greek columns and capitals asserting the confidence of American capitalism. It was my daily duty to meet the president of the Detroit Bank, no less. As the massive Lincoln Continental gracefully glided in front of the mighty edifice of finance, a regular exchange, it was like a mantra. "Oh, good morning, sir." "Morning!" came a grunt from the great man. It sounded more like a reprimand, actually. And then he'd say, "Tell him to wash it." "Oh, yes, sir, of course, you know." So anyway, it was the same every day. The 6-foot-plus, he was a big man, president, eased himself out of the driving seat, which was set for a big man, a tall man, to be quickly replaced by the humble messenger, 5'9", that's my height, who wouldn't dare to mess around with the power seating position. See, in those days I was technophobic. I didn't want to be messing with that, anything. Anyway, I thought I shouldn't touch it, you see. Anyway, it was with difficulty I drove the stately beast. It was dangerous. It was dangerous. I was deeply reclined in this luxurious glove-like thing. I couldn't see very well at all, and I couldn't reach the pedals. It was awful. And anyway, inadequate control of a large vehicle would have been the terminology if I'd have been pulled over. In these precarious circumstances, the Lincoln silently floated to the corner, right again, and then we went down a little street, I went down a little street, which was dwarfed by 2 skyscrapers. A little way down was the entrance to an expensive downtown multi-storey car park used by executives. The likes of you and I wouldn't be going there. We would have to go somewhere else. A young black guy was waiting to take the car to its usual reserved position. I spoke to him. "Oh, good morning. The bank president would like his car washed." "Yes," was the scowling, aggressive response to that. Now this ungracious response irked me, a polite request, The unwarranted attitude had been endured for several days. I'd getting to the point where I'd had enough of it. His rudeness was no mystery. You know, an overnight sleep-stealing low, this is July 1967, an overnight sleep-stealing low of unbearable humidity. He hadn't dipped below 70 degrees, and it was going to get worse because early 8:30 in the morning, it's 70, the heat is going to go, this suit you, this, you know,
I've heard of that.
yeah, the heat would go up and up and up until it was about 90. Oh, Detroit in the summer was a miserable experience anyway. No wonder they're all bad-tempered. And it was hazy pollution in this oven of concrete and cement. Worse still, the atmosphere was thick with ethnic hatred. These were the 1960s, when Detroit was gripped by racial turmoil, eventually leading to an explosion of burning riots which left city blocks gutted, resembling a war zone. Notwithstanding, the humble messenger, me, attempted a remonstration. I'd had enough, so I decided to say something to this lad. It might have been the fifth or sixth day that it was like this. Yes, you know. Anyway, the remonstration was along the lines of their shared lowly circumstances. I was about to challenge this young man. Look, I implored, look. I'm no different to you. I'm not pretending I'm better than you. We're about the same age and probably paid about the same. When I ask you to wash this car, I'm just following orders. There's no need to be so nasty to me. Anyway, this black boy was startled to hear this. He didn't expect this from me, you see. He'd been getting away with it for days. I was startled myself. And at the moment in this drama, it was interrupted by an older black man. Hey, hold on there. Whoa, what's all this about? He turned out to be the boy's boss. I reiterated my main points. I wasn't going to back down. I tried to explain that, I'm not prejudiced against this attendant. In so doing, the two Americans were suddenly transfixed by an unfamiliar foreign accent known as Broad Derbyshire. Where on God's earth is you from? Asked the boss man. Now I have to explain. I first arrived in Detroit in 1963 when, as a curiosity, the boys next door took me to the local high school to address their class. I was a novelty, you see. It was an enthusiastic bunch of clean-cut, all-American boys, demanding to hear my unusual voice. I can remember I stood in front of the class. Greetings, England, shouted one. Welcome to the USA, shouted another. Hi, buddy, shouted somebody on the back row. Hello, shouted several others. Hiya, Englishman, and then, hey, what's he going to talk? Yeah, talk, England. If, this is the teacher speaking now, if you gave him a chance, said the schoolmaster, if you could manage to ask sensible questions, he might respond. Well, sensible questions were asked. It was all right, it all went well, until I described my house, which, unlike their detached houses, was joined up to the other houses, terrace, you see. This produced a sea of shocked faces and a deafening silence. Half a second later, the silence was smashed by a cascade of loud guffaws from raucous males in the room. Now, I have to say, what I actually said was, we don't have asses like your ass. No, our asses sort of touching next ass. You know, like sort of all asses in a row. Now, my Aunt Elizabeth, she got a nice ass. And they all look at it. Anyway, teacher came to the rescue with an important clarification. Perhaps, Narvel, you'll run us through that one again. I think you're referring to the building that you live in, if I'm not mistaken. No sweat, nothing wrong with the way you talk. Anyway, fast forward back to 1967 to these two black guys. I then launched into an angry spiel describing my background of Standy Common mine workers emerging from the bowels of the earth with faces encrusted with coal dust. This is before the age of pithead baths in the 1950s, when I was a little boy. It's all right. And no amount of soap and scrubbing would ever remove that grime, which got under the skin. And it marked the lowly status of a common collier. I also, for good measure, I threw in the fact that it was my belief that at £8 a week, in those days, collier, before Arthur Scargill, this is years before, existing in a primitive terrace cottage, there was precious little difference between a coal miner and a cotton picking slave. For good measure, I threw in the fact that while Detroit Negroes drive around in huge, beautiful automobiles, you know, they just float. My kinfolk, my Uncle Arthur, got a bike on a push bike. And anyway, this tetchy polemic was cut short by the big boss striding forward with an air of menace. He was a big man, albeit he was benign and smiling, but he was indulging a child throwing a tantrum. That was me, you see. Hey, well, Englishman, I guess that's better out than in, he said with a full smile. The smile faded a little bit when addressing his subordinate. Laurent, it's your job to be nice to our customers. We don't sneer at them, and we help them. Yeah, and you can start by explaining the presets. So anyway, suddenly, with a touch of shame, Laurent, whose balloon was quite burst by this time, Laurent slipped into the passenger seat and he asked his customer, me, to get back into the car, asked nicely. I was invited to push a button marked medium, at least I think it was a long time ago, but I've got an idea that the button I pushed was the one he pushed when he got it, because I mean he's dealing with these big limousines all day, so he knows how to do it. And immediately it raised and moved the seat forward, and it was marvellous, you know, so I could see, I could drive anywhere now, it's lovely. Both boys beamed, so we both had smiles, we looked at each other beaming at this sudden demonstration of electronic wizardry and made eye contact in this intimate space in the car. For 2 years looking at each other, the moment lasted longer than it should have had. Hostilities had magically evaporated, and I was now free to savour perfect proportions of quintessential African features. I scanned tempting thick lips, a wide nose, big, wondrous round eyes. In return, the black boy was able to examine a Caucasian countenance so very enticingly close. 50 years ago, I was worth looking at. Yes, okay, we fell in love. But it was all fantasy, because all too soon it was violated by the feared explosion of city violence. The long, hot, smouldering month of July 1967 burst into flames on the Monday, the 24th of July. That's how I'm able to locate it exactly, because it's history when this happened. Like thousands of white workers from segregated suburbs carefully cleansed of Negroes, I did not dare make the daily 20-mile commute from home to downtown Detroit. There were fearful comparisons, a terrible thing is on the television, I remember it well, fearful comparisons of the 1943 race riots in Detroit. 38 people were shot dead. Some commentators spoke of this current incendiary event as the first spark of a civil war. We did actually, that was mentioned several times. Got to remember that during the previous few years, dozens of major American cities had already suffered riots and looting. After several city blocks had been gutted beyond the control of the regular riot police, remember that, federal paratroopers were ordered, sent from Washington to Detroit to restore order. A pretty serious business. A few nervous employees of my bank started to trickle back on the following Monday. I steeled myself to return on the Tuesday. I was giving it a clear break. Anyway, my affair with Laurent didn't last long. You must try to understand the reality of my world. Most people live in a heterosexual network where heterosexual friends get introduced to other heterosexual friends, heterosexual relatives and heterosexual colleagues. When something bad happens, people swap news, they close ranks, they offer help, support, advice, condolences. Heterosexuals get the lot. My family threw me to the wolves. I was on my own. I hadn't been on good terms with my family for a long time, although I actually lived with them. But it was the elephant in the room business, you know. In 1960s Detroit, we were the despised minority in hiding. We were known as fags, queers, and degenerates. The race issue simply complicated an already difficult situation. If the parking people had been white, I was still isolated from relatives and others who, in their view, knew there was something wrong with Narvel. Not a word was ever spoken, but the tension and the shame was always hanging in the air. There's an expression, I've mentioned it already, elephant in the room. I was that invisible elephant, an embarrassment never to be acknowledged, the love that dared not speak its name, another reference to homosexuality. Humiliations were endured on a regular basis. So, to come back to the beginning, at this time, 50 years on after the film, after the riots, I often think about Laurent, the boy I loved, and I wonder, is he still alive? What's he doing? Here you go.